Namaskar. So the theme of this talk is how if we focus and consolidate our different longings, desires, and tendency on our spiritual goal, on God, it gives a certain power and tremendous force. And it is only when we have that power that we can overcome problems. Otherwise, if the mind is scattered in too many directions, we don't have sufficient psychic force to solve a problem. That's the theme of it. Human beings must move towards Paramapurusha, the Supreme Consciousness, if they wish to solve their problems. Human beings should direct all their life's longings and urges towards the Supreme One, and not towards created objects and beings. If the mind is directed towards hundreds of external things, all your psychic potentials will be scattered like a packet of mustard seeds. A packet containing thousands of seeds should be emptied in a special way if the seeds are to be picked up and put back in the packet. In the same way, all the urges and longings should be gathered together and directed towards the Supreme. If this is done, undefeatable psychic energy and undefeatable spiritual energy will grow from within. This will enable people to solve all the world's problems: economic, social, cultural, big and small. Unless one develops oneself in this way, as an ideal human being, one will not be able to solve any problem, no matter how madly one beats one's chest or how loudly one shouts slogans. The solution should be suitable to the problem, just as the doctor's prescription should be appropriate to the disease. The present world is troubled by numerous problems. To solve these problems, we need ideal men and women who are highly evolved from within. Strong men and women whose lives are based on the solid foundation of spirituality. In the absence of such people, the problems will remain unsolved. That is why I say, concentrate all your love and devotion, consolidate all your psychic desires and tendencies, and channelize them towards the Supreme One. Don't allow them to flow towards any other direction, towards any other object. This is taken from a discourse called Ideation on Brahma, and you can find it in Anandamurti, Ideology and Way of Life, Part 10. So we all need mental strength, and when we have it, we get some thrill from that feeling of our own power. We feel empowered. But the mind becomes scattered and weak, and nothing can be accomplished when we're going in too many directions. I remember I had a friend in Japan who was the son of a samurai family, and he was also a psychotherapist and an Osho devotee. And it's been very difficult. I think one of the challenges of my life has been this, kind of, I'm excited by so many different things. And he said to me as a kind of warning, when you are 40, you have to decide what you are not going to do. I think that's still relevant when you're 60. So then it says, a packet containing thousands of seeds needs to be emptied in a special way. If the seeds means you need to kind of, don't scatter them everywhere, just pour them out carefully in one place if you want to get them back together. In the same way, all the urges and longings need to be gathered together and directed towards the Supreme. When we do this, if this is done, then we get undefeatable psychic energy and undefeatable spiritual energy. And I think you're all familiar with this meme, right? This picture of, I think the first picture shows a shark chasing a school of tiny sardines. And then the sardines organize themselves into one focused, consolidated, something bigger than the shark. And then they can scare the shark away. So I think the same image applies to our capacities, our thoughts, our tendencies. If they're scattered, then they're like that school of fish, and the problems will, we can't manage, or we can't control, or we can't overcome the problems. But when we can focus and organize, and when everything is directed in one direction, then we can defeat the problem. Right? Unless one develops oneself in this way, as an ideal human being, one will not be able to solve any problem, no matter how madly one beats one's chest or how loudly one shouts slogans. So it's a good description for the situation today. We're faced with so many critical problems, but just making a lot of noise and protests. The protests have been going on for a long time, but the problems don't continue. And what is needed then is, it's not saying that protests are wrong, but if we don't have the psychic and spiritual force, if those of us who are trying to change something, if we don't have that focus and power that comes with that spiritual force, the problem will not be solved. So if we have a problem, the solution needs to be appropriate to the problem. And that means we have to develop that kind of psychic power. That's what is needed to solve the problem. That is why I say concentrate all your love and devotion, consolidate all your psychic desires and tendencies, and channelize them towards the Supreme One. I remember many, many years ago watching a beautiful film, we should watch it one night, called Chariots of Fire. And it's about a young British man who won the mile race in the Olympics. I'm not sure if it was called the mile race at that time, but yeah. And I think he was the first person to break the 4-minute mile barrier. But he was a devoted Christian, and there was this line in the movie where he says, "When I run, I feel his pleasure." Right? So his running was kind of like an offering, a service to his God. And that gave him this exceptional kind of happiness, which gave him the capacity to overcome these barriers of pain, etc. So when we can do our actions in this way, even if it's something like he was running because he enjoyed it, but there was something in his running which was spiritual, which was an offering. So when we have to mix our life, a balance between work and enjoyment. We are here to be happy, but we have to somehow try to bring a spiritual element, at least by offering what we enjoy or reminding ourselves that this is also an expression of the divine. And when we can do that, we keep our spiritual focus. Our action becomes some kind of service as well as some kind of enjoyment. If we forget, then all we get is limited and temporary pleasure. But if we remember, what we get is bliss. Now, often there's this famous saying that life is what happens to you when you were planning something else. So we have our plans to maybe go for a picnic or something, and then something comes up. And if our only objective is to have that picnic, then we will be unhappy and we will be frustrated. But if our objective, and we can remember our objective is to please the divine, to reach the divine, to become the Buddha, then even though we have to abandon our picnic and do something else, that something else can become part of our deeper objective, right? To remember the divine, to see the divine in what has come up when I was planning something else. And maybe we have to, the toilet has broken and there's, a mess everywhere and I have to clean it up when I was planning to do something nice and enjoyable. But if I did that something enjoyable without remembering the divine, I get momentary pleasure and limited pleasure. When I do clean up the mess from the toilet, I don't get that momentary pleasure. Maybe I get suffering. But if I offer it, if I do it as service to the divine, if I remember my mantra while I'm doing it, I don't get momentary pleasure. I'm getting momentary suffering, but I'm getting eternal bliss at the same time, right? So the key, and that gives us an incredible flexibility. If we have one goal, and that is to be the Buddha, to be self-realized, to please the divine, it doesn't matter what's happening. It doesn't matter if you plan something and something else happens and you have to do something hard and unpleasant and difficult. You can do it with awareness, you can do it with mindfulness, and that will bring bliss and enable you also and inspire you and give you, recharge you when you're doing that. There's this common saying, art for art's sake. And our master Shrii Anandamurti said, no, it shouldn't be like that, art for art's sake, because then it's something selfish and limited and temporary. But he said what it should be is art for service and blessedness, right? To serve the children of the divine and to offer bliss or to dedicate to something higher. And then that art has something transcendental in it, has something of deeper value, and it brings a kind of satisfaction. So we have to think that when we enjoy ourselves, can we enjoy this thing in a way that gives service and blessedness and gives bliss? If we can't, if it's not possible, then we have to question, is it worth doing? Now, here we are. We are human beings, and we are where we are in our stage of development. We can't just snap our fingers and be able to dedicate everything to the divine tomorrow. But we can try. We can begin. We can start now. And every effort that we make will bring a little more lasting bliss in our lives. And we start in a simple way, simply by trying to remember for example, our mantra, where we remind ourselves that every work that we do, every person we meet, every task, every object is an expression of the divine. If you can hold on to that, then that's the beginning. And as you hold on to that, what you discover is that the enjoyment that you get from remembering is actually deeper and more powerful than the enjoyment you get from the physical enjoyment or the psychic pleasure of whatever. And so gradually your bliss shifts from the physical and the psychic temporary enjoyment, because you find you're actually getting a deeper satisfaction from being mindful while enjoying it. So as you discover that more and more, it becomes easier to let go of those things, and gradually it's not so much an effort to let go of those things. It's because you have already experienced that there's a greater bliss in dedicating and being mindful. Thank you very much, and namaskar.